Hey guys, this is Sid with svtperformance.com, and as you can see, I've got a couple Super Duties here. We're back at 5-Star Tuning in Florence, South Carolina. What makes these two trucks different is this one has a 7.3 Godzilla. This one has the new 2020 6.7 liter Powerstroke. We're going to give you a little underhood tour of each, just to show you what the differences are between the gas motor versus the diesel, and why one may be better for your application than the other. So let's take a look and see what the differences are. So we're going to start off here with the 2020 6.7 Powerstroke turbo diesel. This of course is the new updated model with way more power. We got over 1,000 pound-feet of torque in this thing, way up in the 400 horsepower range, like 475. So this thing is putting out tremendous power, and they've changed quite a few things from the 2019 version. A lot of it you really can't see. One thing that you can see is we've gone to an aluminum intake manifold instead of the old plastic one. Of course, that's probably to handle more boost pressure, which is always a good thing. We always love more boost. The turbo is also changed, but it is so buried back in here that you can't really see it. But there is an updated turbocharger on the engine. Of course, we got a big EGR cooler on this side. And because Ford can't help themselves, they've also changed the coolant spec again. It looks like it's green this time, and I'm sure it's not the same green fluid as we saw in the early 2000s, like 2001, 2002, before they went to the infamous gold coolant that killed many a 6-liter Powerstroke. But yeah, Ford's got a new coolant. Nothing to be surprised about. This particular truck has the dual alternator option, so we've got one right here and one over here. I do not want to have to change either one of these because a lot of the truck's going to have to come apart to do it. On this side, it looks like you're going to have to take at least the boost pipe off and the main upper rad hose. One thing I don't recall on the earlier 6.7 trucks having is on this upper radiator hose. This one's got a nice piece of chafing gear. The earlier trucks may have it, and I just don't remember, but that is a nice piece of chafing gear. Obviously they don't want all these lines and other fittings and this little metal clamp here rubbing through this hose, because if you get a leak in that, that is not a good thing. So we've got a little bit of chafe gear on it. I can see one thing right there that over many thousands of miles could cause a problem. We've got a clamp that should be pressed down there a little bit. If this was my truck, I would probably put a T-bolt on this, because I really would probably change the pipe and everything in general, because I don't like these rubber boost pipes. You know, you can see how soft that thing is, and imagine that with 30 or 40 psi of air pressure coming out of the intercooler here going into the intake manifold. I would rather have a hard pipe with a nice silicone coupler and a T-bolt on it. As it stands, it's going into, looks like we've got an IAT sensor, could be a map sensor, I don't know, probably an IAT sensor. And on the end of this rubber hose, we've got a plastic fitting with a quick connect. I'm just not a fan of this kind of construction. I would rather just have nice silicone boots and T-bolts. That being said, that would not be the most fun to try to get a silicone connector and a couple T-bolts down here. So I can see why they go with this construction method. That is obviously going to be way simpler to assemble than the method that I would like to use. But moving on, we've got fuel filter underhood, same as it's always been. Got the, coming out of the turbo, we've got a nice pipe, metal pipe with silicone connectors. I like seeing that. And of course they do this on the hot side because the rubber, if you use a rubber hose here, it's not going to hold up to the high temperatures coming out of the turbo nearly as well as rubber, or rubber would not hold up as well as metal, I'm trying to say. But after it goes through the intercooler, which looks to be exactly the same as the previous model years, it'll be much cooler. And I guess Ford says the rubber hose is fine. Moving over to the other side of the engine, we've got, of course, two batteries, one on this side, one on that side. On the 7.3 trucks, dual batteries are an option. This truck we have over here does not have that, but we'll show that in a few minutes. But we do have dual batteries, of course, because this is a diesel. We have an air box, and we pulled the filters out of these things earlier, and the diesel one of course has a scoop and everything, and you can see the filter media back here, and it's got sort of like a felt media covering a paper media. I'm pretty sure, not 100% sure because I didn't stand them right beside each other, but I think these lower air boxes are the same no matter if it's a gas or a diesel. And I'm pretty sure you could put the diesel air filter into a gas motor and vice versa. However, the air filter for the gas motor does say gas right on it, so they obviously don't want you putting the gas motor air filter in the diesel. And in just looking at this, the diesel one is obviously a more robust and probably better filtering unit, and that's probably because they don't want to dust out that turbocharger on the diesel. Moving on down the line though, the actual hat for the intake box is of course bigger on the diesel. It's larger in diameter, and that just goes with it's making more horsepower, so you would expect that. You know, this thing is making over 1,000 pound-feet of torque. Like I said, like 1,050 pound-feet of torque. It's going to have a lot of airflow to make all that power. Of course, we have the EGR cooler right here on top. Versus previous Powerstrokes, this is definitely a better setup. The 6-liter one, it sucked, wiped out a bunch of engines. The 6.4 Powerstroke, it's EGR cooler. They actually had two, one sort of down this way and another one running along the side of the engine just above the exhaust manifold. They performed better than the 6-liter one and were not nearly as prone to cracking and clogging and things like that, but they were just terrible to service. This one, if it does ever have an issue, it's very easy to get to. You can just pull it off. It actually splits apart right here, and you can take the core out and replace it or just clean it. But so that's an easier item to service on these trucks. Of course, we've got exhaust pyros all over the place. That's just basically been the story of diesel engines for the last 15 plus years in these trucks. Is just more emissions equipment, and that's what we're dealing with. So even just on the top side here, you got that massive EGR cooler, but I just wanted to get just an overlook. I mean, you can barely see a valve cover on this thing. It's sort of buried down in there somewhere. You can sort of see it. And of course, you can see a high pressure fuel rail down this side, but you can barely just make out parts of the actual engine on this thing. Look, you can see the feed system. I mean, what's it going to take to change a belt on this? It's just jammed in here. Of course, you've got a massive fan, mechanical, of course. And yeah, the story of this engine is basically it is just crammed into this engine bay. But everything works well. It makes a ton of power. You can't complain about that. These things tow tremendously. I mean, I can't believe we're seeing horsepower numbers out of Super Duties that you used to have a C15 Caterpillar diesel to make. You know, this is Peterbilt levels of power coming from, you know, a Ford truck engine, which is great. Of course, we've got another coolant reservoir here. This is for your intercooler system because it is an air to water system. Again, like I said, intercooler's over here, but that's pretty much it. That's the tour of the underhood area. Oh, look, you can barely see a little bit of turbocharger just through that gap right there. Barely see it. And of course, oil spec is now 10W30 for the Super Duties, although if you're working it really hard, they say you can run 5W40. I'm a big 15W40 fan. I like that in just about everything. But then again, we're in South Carolina where it's extremely hot in the summers and doesn't really get cold in the winter, so you can get by with that. But you know, your mileage may vary. Run whatever oil you feel is appropriate for your conditions. But that's basically it. She's piled in here. I do like that aluminum intake. I like that a lot better. Of course, throttle body. Why does a diesel have a throttle body? Because you have to create positive manifold vacuum to pull in the exhaust gases from the EGR. If you didn't have this, basically diesels make no vacuum. and EGR systems wouldn't work. So you have to have a butterfly in here to create a little vacuum in the manifold to draw these exhaust gases into the engine. But that's pretty much it. ECU over there, brake booster way back in here. I keep saying that's it, but I keep finding more things. Speaking of brake boosters, this particular truck, and again, Ford changes this up all the time based on the spec. This is an F250, and we have a vacuum assisted brake booster instead of the hydro boost system, which we used to get on all diesel trucks. Since this one has a vacuum pump on it, you can get vacuum assisted brakes. I think even on the single rear wheel F350s you get hydro boost brakes, which I really like hydro boost brakes much better than vacuum boosted brakes. If you ever have the option, definitely get hydro boost. But for me, that would be the selling point on going to an F350 versus an F250, even on single rear wheel trucks, is just to get the hydro boost brakes, if they're still doing that. You know, they change these specs all the time, just like the Coolant specs. And there's the electronically assisted steering box buried way down in there as well. But let's go take a look at the 7.3 and show you just how different it is under the hood. And now we're back here under the hood of a 2020 F250 with the 7.3 liter Godzilla gasoline V8. And you know, we've given you guys a tour of one of these trucks before underneath, but I just wanted to definitely compare and contrast real quick of gas motor versus diesel. And you saw how packed in that diesel motor is, but just look at the space and serviceability on either side of this thing. I mean, you can actually change the spark plugs if you want to, fairly easy. Of course, this side's a little more compressed because we've got the battery over here and you've got some heater hoses running. But just look at the driver's side of the engine. I mean, you can get to everything. I mean, how easy would it be to do headers on this truck? Just everything is very easy to get to. Alternator right here on top, easy to get to. I can see the tensioner for the belt right there. Let me get camera down here. The tensioner's right there. Easy to change a belt. Just put your ratchet in there, pull it back. Big water pump and fan, of course. I had some questions about the electronic assisted steering. That is not your steering box. All that electric motor is doing is assisting the steering and making it a little bit softer, easier, lighter at low speeds, and it firms it up at high speeds. Of course, highway speed, you don't want to be moving all over the place, so you want your steering to firm up a little bit. But that's not the steering box. The actual steering box is right there, and it still has, you know, your traditional steering box. Of course, you can see the fittings going into it here. Interestingly enough, 7.3 uses yellow coolant, not gold coolant. Don't get confused. This is the new Motorcraft yellow coolant. Try to keep up here. Like I said, Ford likes to change their coolants with the weather, so who knows what you're going to end up with in the next year or so. But it's just way less complicated. Again, you can see this one has, you can see the filter media in here. I'm pretty sure you could use a Powerstroke air filter in this if you wanted to, but probably don't need it, because if you look at this thing, the filter media is very tightly packed, and if you hold this thing up, you can't even see any daylight through it. So it's a very densely packed filter. They probably just wanted something a little bit more robust for the turbocharged applications on diesel. That, and if that turbo gets dusted out, it probably costs more in warranty work to change out the turbo on that than it would be to snatch this motor out and put a new one in. So just one of those little things they get by with. But we do have the same lower air box with the air intake scoop, which is very nice to see. But you know, you guys have saw it. I'll link the video in the description below of our previous tour under this thing. But this is just one of the selling points of these new gas motor in the Super Duty, is, you know, it makes a tremendous amount of power, gets halfway decent mileage, and you can actually work on it. I can see the engine, I can see the ground down there. You can't even see the valve covers on that 6.7 truck. It's just nice to have a nice open workspace for somebody like me. I like to tinker with this stuff. And just imagine how great this thing would look with a Pro Charger hanging off the front or a big Whipple right on the top, which we've seen Pro Charger show off some pictures of their blower. I'm guessing the Whipple one will be coming before too terribly long, but that's going to look just nasty under the hood of this thing. And then you're also talking a $9,000 option difference. So you buy a whole lot of 87 octane for $9,000. You know, it's not like that thing's getting 23 miles to the gallon. Those days are gone. Those days left when we got over like 250 horsepower with diesels. So if mileage is your concern, you probably shouldn't be buying an 8,000 pound truck anyways. Oh, speaking of 8,000 pounds, yeah, this one weighs 8,000 pounds. This one's like 7,000. So, but that's pretty much it. I just wanted to show you guys the difference. I wanted this video to be a little bit quicker, but it didn't work out that way. But yeah, so tons of real estate. You can get an extra battery on the 7.3 trucks. It's an option. This truck just doesn't have it. But yeah, that's pretty much it. This is a trimmer, and it is 5-star tuned with the 93 octane tune from 5-star, and we're going to be doing a little ride and drive later on in the week with this truck, so stay tuned for that. If you don't want to miss it, please hit the subscribe button. We really appreciate that if you guys do, and we'll see you next time. And as always, if you want to keep up with the latest news, reviews, and inside information on your favorite Ford performance related vehicles, head over to sptperformance.com. You guys like my little step? You know, these trucks are tall. What am I supposed to do?